It's 1795. A 16-year-old boy named Daniel McGinnis is wandering the eastern shore of Oak Island, Nova Scotia, a small, unremarkable island about a mile off the mainland coast. He notices something odd. A circular depression in the earth, roughly 13 feet across, sitting beneath an old oak tree with a single sawn-off branch hanging directly above it. The branch still has the marks of a pulley mechanism. Something heavy was once lowered here. And someone wanted it to stay down. What Daniel McGinnis found that afternoon would consume the next 2 centuries of treasure hunters, engineers, historians, and millionaires. At least 6 people would die searching for what's buried beneath that island. But here's the detail most accounts leave out: by the time the first real excavation began, the pit had already done something that should have been impossible. McGinnis returned the next day with 2 friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan. They began digging. At 2 feet down, they hit a layer of flagstones, flat, carefully laid rocks that did not occur naturally on Oak Island. At 10 feet, a platform of solid oak logs, fitted tight across the shaft. They dug through it. At 20 feet, another oak platform. At 30 feet, another. Whatever this was, someone had built it. Layer by layer. Platform by platform. Going down. The boys couldn't continue alone. They needed equipment, workers, money. It would take 8 years before anyone returned with enough resources to dig seriously. And when the Onslow Company arrived in 1803, what they found at 90 feet changed the nature of this mystery entirely. At 90 feet down, their workers pulled up a flat stone. A large, carefully inscribed stone. The symbols carved into its surface weren't random. A professor at Halifax College later translated them, or claimed to, as a simple message: asterisk 40 feet below, £2 million are buried. Asterisk that stone, in the records I've kept, disappeared sometime in the early 20th century. Only rubbings and second-hand accounts survive. Convenient, perhaps. Or something else entirely. But the Onslow Company never reached 40 feet deeper. Because at 98 feet, the shaft flooded overnight. Not slowly. Not from rain. The water rose nearly to surface level by morning, salt water, in a pit that was well above the tidal water line. When they pumped it, it refilled at the same rate. When they dug a parallel shaft to intercept it, that flooded too. What they eventually discovered, and this is where the engineering becomes genuinely unsettling, was a constructed tunnel running from the pit horizontally to the beach. A flood tunnel. Lined with river rocks. Packed with beach grass as a filter. Engineered to activate the moment the dig reached a specific depth. Someone hadn't just buried something on Oak Island. They'd built a booby trap around it. And they'd built it well enough that it still works today. Here's where the official story begins to fall apart. For most of the 19th century, the prevailing theory was pirates. Captain Kidd. Blackbeard. Someone had buried plunder and rigged the pit to protect it. It's a clean story. It's also almost certainly wrong, and 3 findings will show you exactly why in the next 2 minutes. The third one was suppressed in an official report for over 60 years. First, the flood tunnel system. Maritime engineers who've studied the design estimate it required months of organized labor, advanced surveying knowledge, and an understanding of tidal hydraulics that no pirate crew in the 17th century demonstrably possessed. The tunnel's angle was calculated. Its filter system was deliberate. This wasn't a crew of sailors with shovels. This was an engineering project. Second, the artifacts. In 1937, workers using a drilling rig sent down a core sampler and pulled up a small piece of parchment, actual sheepskin parchment with ink on it, still partially legible after 3 centuries underwater. The letters visible were reportedly 6 spores UI. The sample was authenticated as pre-1800 in composition. It's since vanished from the public record. The company that recovered it filed no formal report. Third, and this is the one that was quietly buried, a carbon dating analysis conducted in the 1970s on wood fragments from the deepest excavated layers returned a date range centered around 1200 to 1400 CE. Centuries before any known European settlement in Nova Scotia. Centuries before any pirate era. The report was included in a private survey, never published in a peer-reviewed journal, and the original samples were reportedly lost before independent verification could occur. Whatever is in that pit may be older than anyone officially wants to acknowledge. Theories have multiplied across 2 centuries. The Knights Templar, fleeing Europe with the Holy Grail or the original manuscripts of the Torah. Francis Bacon, hiding coded proof that he wrote Shakespeare's plays. Spanish conquistadors concealing colonial treasure. The British military using the island during the American Revolution. Each theory has its advocates. Each theory has its gaps. What the evidence actually supports, stripped of romance, is this: a sophisticated, pre-industrial engineering project, conducted by an organized group with substantial resources and advanced knowledge, designed specifically to prevent retrieval. The materials used, the construction method, and the depth all suggest a group that intended the contents to stay hidden for a very long time. Few who've studied the deeper records have been comfortable with what that implies. The excavations never stopped. The Triton Alliance sank millions into the island in the 1960s and 70s. A camera lowered into a flooded cavern at 230 feet returned footage that some analysts claimed showed a severed hand, a chest, and wooden beams. The footage quality was too poor to confirm anything. The cavern later collapsed during drilling. More recently, the Lagina brothers, whose work you may know from television, have excavated with modern equipment, ground-penetrating radar, and professional archaeological oversight. What they found continues to complicate the easy answers. Medieval-era lead crosses. A 17th-century Spanish galleon bolt. A stone with carved symbols potentially matching the Knights Templar tradition. And in the so-called swamp area of the island, evidence of constructed land, the swamp may not be natural. It may have been flooded deliberately. As another layer of concealment. The pit is now so compromised by 2 centuries of excavation, collapsed tunnels, and flooded chambers that extracting anything intact, if something remains, may no longer be possible with existing technology. What I found in the archives on this case isn't a single answer. It's a consistent pattern. Every time a credible excavation approaches a certain depth, something fails. Pumps break. Tunnels collapse. Funding runs out. 6 men have died on that island since 1965, the number enshrined now in local legend, the belief that 7 must die before the treasure reveals itself. Whether that's folklore or prophecy or simple statistics, the island has so far held its count. Daniel McGinnis was 16 when he found that circular depression in the earth. He spent the rest of his life on Oak Island. He never recovered what was buried there. Neither has anyone else. The money pit still floods. The flood tunnels still work. And whatever was placed at the bottom of that shaft, by hands unknown, in a year no one has yet confirmed, remains exactly where someone left it. Some secrets, it seems, were engineered to last. If this is the kind of record you want kept, subscribe. The archivist will be here.